Next on Currents News, persecuted for their Christian beliefs. Today, activists in major U.S. cities coming together to rally for justice. Then highlighting the scourge of human trafficking with the full support of the Vatican. The emotional photos in the Nuns Healing Hearts exhibit.
Riding a New York City MTA express bus will cost you $6.75 one way. Some families are outraged because they're digging deep into their pockets just to send their children to school. I'm Tim Harfman. I'll have the story coming up.
We are the champions! And the women's soccer champs get a world-class welcome in the Big Apple. The news starts right now. Good evening, I'm Emily Druby. All across the world, people are subjected to persecution because of their faith. They're tortured, enslaved, forced to leave their homes, and even killed. Today, people across the U.S. are bringing attention to this global issue.
A face that they didn't agree with.
Activists taking to the streets.
Christians are fleeing.
Rallies held throughout the day on Wednesday in these 15 cities across the United States.
The world's worst persecutors of people of faith.
The hope to fight persecution by bringing attention to all those around the world who are suffering for their Christian beliefs. Their other goal, to ask a prominent law firm to stop doing business with countries that they say tolerate or engage in Christian persecution. The rallies organized by the groups Nations in Action and Save the Persecuted Christians. Experts say faithful around the world are being targeted, from Burkina Faso to Sri Lanka. 2019 has been one of the bloodiest years for believers. According to Aid to the Church in Need, a nonprofit that protects Christians suffering because of their faith, an estimated 327 million Christians live in countries with religious persecution. The nonprofit was not involved with these rallies, but has been fighting for the rights of persecuted Christians across the world for years. In an interview done with Currents News in May, their director of outreach and evangelization, Ed Clancy, spoke with us about other ways to fight Christian persecution.
Political pressure that we can put on as governments, but most of all for us faithful to pray and to support these Christians, to keep them hopeful and let them know that they're not alone.
We did reach out to that law firm but received no response. The former head of the U.S. Bishops' Conference has been diagnosed with cancer. Archbishop Joseph Kurtz of Louisville, Kentucky, announced the sad news on Wednesday. He will soon begin treatment for bladder and prostate cancer at the Duke University Cancer Institute. The Archbishop noted he feels well and will remain in North Carolina for the remainder of his treatment. Archbishop Kurtz served as head of the USCCB from 2013 to 2016. The American Red Cross is pleading for an infusion of blood donors. The organization says the long 4th of July holiday resulted in about 17,000 fewer donations last week, making the current supply less than 3 days. Officials say a 5-day supply is required to be ready for emergencies, as well as to keep up with standard blood product needs. Parents are pushing the MTA to cut the cost of the city's express bus fares, fed up with having to dig deeper into their pockets to make sure their children travel safely. Currents News' Tim Harfman reports from Diker Heights.
New York City express buses are driving some parents crazy, costing them $6.75 each way to send their children to and from school or summer programs.
$6.75 is lunch money practically, and it's unfair.
Antoinette Roudis and her friend Antoinette Catrona are two Brooklyn moms pushing the city to make the fare fair. The MTA already issues student passes, but the green and white Metro cards only cover subways and local buses, making commutes longer for those living in certain neighborhoods who rely on express buses.
There are pockets in the boroughs that don't have clear transportation to, let's say, the train.
For one child, paying the express bus fare adds up to nearly $300 a month. That's about $2,700 per school year. This mother duo turning to local politicians who say they need 1,500 signatures to present the idea of lowering the rate to the MTA board. So far, they've received over 1,000 signatures. These Brooklyn families send their sons from Diker Heights to Manhattan's Xavier High School. These moms say although there are Catholic schools located closer to their Brooklyn homes, they want to be able to decide where they send their children.
Education is very important, and picking the right schools is very important. This is foundation for these kids.
The MTA has yet to fulfill our request for a statement. These parents urging people to sign their petition by going online at change.org and search their specific title, Lower MTA Express Bus Fares for high school students traveling to and from school. In Diker Heights, Brooklyn, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
The Gulf Coast is bracing for a hurricane. Weather experts following a tropical storm that could make landfall this weekend. But as Mary Maloney explains, the storm system is already causing problems on land.
Big Easy walloped by wet weather.
Our car was halfway underwater.
Wow.
So there's about 6 inches of flooding in our car.
Flooding engulfed streets and transformed indoor stairs into waterfalls. During the flash flooding emergency, rescue crews in New Orleans responded to more than 250 emergency calls.
My door didn't want to open, so I had to find a way to get out the car. So I started the car back up, got out the window, rolled the window back up.
Water spouts formed in the sky, prompting a tornado warning. But the worst is yet to come.
We all need to take this very, very seriously.
A tropical system is churning in the Gulf of Mexico. The National Weather Center predicts Tropical Storm Barry will form by Thursday and strengthen to a hurricane by Saturday before making landfall.
We know it's going to be a big storm, a significant rain and storm surge event.
Louisiana's governor warns the already soggy state could see 10 to 15 inches of rain within 24 hours from Friday into Saturday.
That is a short time period for such intense rain.
As Texas's governor says, the Lone Star State should brace for the slow-moving storm.
If you prepare for the very worst, you will be able to come out far better in the end.
Mary Maloney, Currents News.
In California, San Bernardino Bishop Gerald Barnes is asking for prayers for those dealing with the aftermath of last week's earthquakes. In a statement posted to the diocesan website, the bishop says, "We ask God to comfort and console them, and we also pray for the protection of all those men and women involved in the efforts of relief and recovery in these areas." The massive earthquakes cracked the very foundation of the small town, and residents are struggling to survive in the aftermath. Omar Jimenez reports.
The two strong earthquakes are now days gone, but in the small town of Trona, California, it's still very much top of mind.
We have everything from toilet paper, paper towels, personal hygiene.
Julia Doss is helping organize supplies for her town. A town that is now temporarily without a post office, condemned in the damage, and a town that is now largely without running water. Trona is only miles from the epicenter of the earthquakes, the quakes leaving a visible crack in the road and in the desert ground.
You can see it right here.
This used to be one even surface.
You could be at the wrong place at the wrong time, you know.
And homes shook violently, shelves emptied in seconds.
It just felt like it was never going to stop.
Kay Bird and her family didn't want to take any chances either, so they went to a nearby church and slept outside.
We thought it was safer that way because they said another one was coming. And if it was worse than that one, you definitely didn't want to be in our house or anywhere near that area, you know.
In the days since the strongest earthquakes, there have been aftershocks in the thousands, a subtle reminder of what was and the unpredictability of what may come. In Trona, California, I'm Omar Jimenez reporting.
It was 69 years ago this month, the last time Private First Class Roger Lee Woods was seen. All these years later, his remains are finally heading back home for a proper burial. The Korean War veteran was one of the first soldiers deployed in the war, just 17 years old when he posed for this photo. Nearly 7 decades after he went missing in action, his body was escorted from the airport to the funeral home as people lined the streets to honor him. New York welcomed home champions today. The U.S. women's national soccer team honored with a ticker tape parade in celebration of their historic World Cup victory. Currents News' Tamara Lane has the story.
Fresh off their historic fourth World Cup win, the U.S. women's national team take a victory lap.
We are the champions of the world.
New York City hosting a ticker tape parade for the world champs. The triumphant team has dominated soccer, securing 4 titles in 28 years, twice as many as any other country in the tournament.
This World Cup win is so much more than what was on the field. It seems like one of those just sort of iconic turning points in history, to be honest.
But their battles go beyond the field. In March, members of the team filed a lawsuit saying they've shown the same skill as men, but played more games, generated more money, and performed better, all while receiving a fraction of the pay.
It's really more about the investment in the game. Is the investment equal?
Chance of equal pay following the players back to New York City and down the Canyon of Heroes.
These 23 champions are banging on the glass ceiling.
Prior to the parade, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo had his own welcome for the U.S. champions.
You should get paid the same amount, whatever the job is. These are women's soccer players. They play the same game that the men's soccer players play. By the way, they play it better.
Governor Cuomo taking the opportunity to sign into law pay equity legislation.
New York is going to lead the way.
And though the team waits to mediate their suit with the U.S. Soccer Federation, they celebrate their massive victory with fans, New York, and the nation. Tamara Lane, Currents News.
And for full coverage of all the festivities, go to thetablet.org or follow our Facebook page, Currents News. There's a lot more news headed your way. The Department of Homeland Security says there's still a humanitarian crisis at the U.S.-Mexico border, but that border arrests are dropping. And photo exhibit blessed by Pope Francis is shining a light on the evils of human trafficking. Then a look at how the changing demographics in the Brooklyn Diocese are affecting a century-old tradition. Do you have a story idea or want to share a tip? Email us at newstips@desalesmedia.org or call our 24-hour number, 718-517-3122. We'll be right back. Drawings from children detained at the border may end up in the Smithsonian. The museum says a curator reached out to CNN and the American Academy of Pediatrics to ask about the art. The sketches were made by 3 children between 10 and 11 who have been released from Border Patrol custody and were staying at a facility run by the Catholic Church in McAllen, Texas. Border arrests have dropped from May to June. That's according to the Department of Homeland Security. They say that after cooperation from Mexico, there have been less enforcement actions. Arrests have dropped 28%, a bigger decline than the same time last year. Still, the DHS insists there is a humanitarian crisis at the border because of an influx of migrants they're working to address. In an effort to draw attention to the growing crisis of human trafficking, Pope Francis blessed an exhibition in May that highlights the struggles of trafficking victims all over the world. Sean Richardson reports on how women religious are critical in the fight.
The International Network of Consecrated Life Against Trafficking in Persons, better known as Talitha Cum, has celebrated its 10th anniversary with a moving exhibition entitled Nuns Healing Hearts. It was the Pope himself who inaugurated this exhibition, composed of images taken by international humanitarian photographer Lisa Christine. It is a culmination of more than a year and a half's work, bringing her to more than 6 countries.
I think the thing that has touched me most about this is just working intimately with the nuns and seeing how tenderly they walk forward, but with so much strength. And they tirelessly help people. And they have so little resource, so they're able to do so much with just their presence and their active help.
Gabriele Botani, coordinator of the Talitha Cum network, also participated in the journey throughout Italy, the Philippines, Thailand, Guatemala, the United States, and Mexico. We're used to carrying out our projects without much publicity, and I must say agreeing to these photos was a little bit complicated at first. This culture of exploitation for profit turns people into objects, merely to be used, abused, and ultimately abandoned. You could say thrown away. In any case, what you find is still the destruction of life in all its depth. The project was made possible through the collaboration of the Vatican's Giglio Foundation. Its president explains why it is so important to support such a cause.
Here are sisters doing what we all wish we could do in real life, if we had the time, or the heart, or the courage. We don't. We're too human. But they do it for us. They do it in place of us. And so the very least we can do is to give them a little bit of money that will go directly to the work on the ground of the sisters.
The exhibition, which has already been blessed by the Pope, will be open to the public until July the 10th. It is situated just a few meters from the Vatican, in the headquarters of the International Union of Superiors General. The Talitha Cum International Network currently has 2,000 nuns collaborating in 76 countries in 5 continents. In Rome, Sean Richardson, Currents News.
It's an Italian-American experience in the Diocese of Brooklyn like no other. The Giglio Festival, a centuries-old tradition that kicks off tonight. The highlight, a 4-ton, 7-story tower that graces the Williamsburg skyline, lifted by manpower alone. But as Currents News' Tim Harfman first reported a few months ago, in order for the more than 100-year-old tradition to continue, volunteers were needed for the first time in history.
Strike up the band. Our Lady of Mount Carmel Church is preparing for its annual Giglio Feast with a feast. The tradition featuring 100 men under the steel beams of the Giglio structure, lifting the 72-foot tall, 4-ton tower. At the top, an Italian saint. At this dinner, most of these men have been part of it for decades.
For as long as I can remember.
But in order for the Giglio to continue soaring through the Williamsburg skies, extra manpower is needed.
At my age, the body, the joints don't hold up like they used to.
For the first time in the 100-plus year history, they're holding a recruitment drive. Monsignor Jamie Gigantiello is Our Lady of Mount Carmel's pastor. He says this year's feast will go on as planned, but recruiting new members is vital to lift the future of the Italian-American tradition.
It's very hard to get the younger generation involved. Many of the lifters that are lifting today, they grew up in the neighborhood. But since the neighborhood have changed, many people moved away.
Nearly 20 new people have already signed up. Nino Colombo grew up in Williamsburg and attended the feast as a child. He explains why he's getting involved almost 4 decades later.
Try something new for a change. Support a friend of mine who's been doing this for 22 years.
Sammy Kosiari also grew up in the Brooklyn neighborhood. Now a Long Island resident, he's returning to his roots.
I finally, found myself like, hey, I've never been a lifter. I had an opportunity, so I wanted to take advantage of it.
But the feast isn't only about tradition, it's about faith. These men lift the Giglio in memory of their late family members and friends.
You're carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders, okay? So you're kind of doing penance for the people that can't do it for themselves.
It's not too late to sign up. Go online at olmcfeast.com. This year, Giglio Sunday falls on July 14th. In Williamsburg, Brooklyn, Tim Harfman, Currents News.
Be sure to tune into Currents News as we have continuing coverage of the Giglio Feast. I will have a report tomorrow on the Coronation Mass that will kick off the feast tonight. In Currents News, Tim Harfman will have a report on the Giglio Lift next Monday. Up next on Currents News, the unique friendship between retired journalist Michael Bobrow and Bishop Nicholas DiMarzio. The moving story of how they built a bridge of understanding between faiths is coming up. And the tablet has a brand new page called Our Diocesan Family, where you can share your pictures of recent baptisms, Holy Communions, confirmations, marriage, all of the joyous sacraments. For more details and to submit your photos, go to thetablet.org/ourdiocesanfamily. Your picture may be published in an upcoming issue of the newspaper. We'll be right back. Finally tonight, a special assignment report we first told you about in May. A unique friendship built on years of communication, forged the old-fashioned way by handwritten letter from one man of faith to another. It all started when the Bishop of Brooklyn, Nicholas DiMarzio, opened up his mail one day.
Hi, Jeff. How are you? How are the Yankees doing?
85-year-old Michael Bobrow is all about community and making connections.
I like your West sweater a lot.
A longtime journalist, long retired, this Bronx native now spends his days chatting with residents in this modest assisted living facility in Canarsie, nourishing his mind and his faith with books, music, and the long-lost art of letter writing.
I've been writing to His Excellency Bishop DiMarzio for, I would say, roughly 2 years. The bishop was always very kind to respond to my letters, very kindly.
Mr. Bobrow's letters, written longhand and sent to the bishop via snail mail, are filled with historical references and talk of modern-day controversies. He was initially inspired to reach out because of a letter he wrote to the editor of the tablet. In it, he agreed with the church's stance on abortion, even though he made it clear, "I am not Christian, I am Jewish." After it was published, he decided it was time to make an interfaith connection.
My Jewish faith, of course, motivates much of my thinking. I mean, I believe in God, and I feel that this is, paramount in my life. I feel that I should address non-Jewish leaders with my concerns.
Those concerns include the rights of the unborn and the importance of being a student of history, something Bishop DiMarzio greatly enjoys about their correspondence.
They're fascinating letters because he is basically an historian. He knows the history of the Jewish people, and he also knows his own personal history. He is very much up on current state of affairs, political around the world. It's a letter you want to read because you're going to learn something.
Like learning about Mr. Bobrow's family, roots that go all the way back to Tsarist Russia.
In Tsarist Russia, my family was pro-monarchy. My great-grandfather is a person honored by Tsar Alexander III in the royal palace for his service to the state. I mean, it's unbelievable.
And Mr. Bobrow is still going strong, using his words to make a difference and cherishing special moments, like when the bishop made a surprise visit.
Well, I didn't know it was the bishop at first. He said, "Oh, hello, Father. May I ask who I'm speaking with?" So His Excellency said, "I'm Bishop DiMarzio." So I said, "Wow."
The visit giving both men a chance to continue to build a bridge of understanding.
Well, I think it is most important. People have to have contacts with different religions.
This is important to us. Our faith, certainly since the Second Vatican Council, has taught us about the interreligious dialogue. He understands it, he lives it.
Even Pope Francis agrees just a short time ago, reaffirming once again that we should not be afraid of our differences because that's just how God wants it.
Ci sono tante religioni che alcuni nascono dalla cultura, ma sempre guardano il cielo, guardano Dio.
Two different faiths intertwined and forever connected by a shared history of tradition and common values.
He's one of the persons I would say is a friend, a pen pal.
I really feel, he's not just the bishop, of course, but I consider him as a good friend.
A tried and true form of art, fashioned the old-fashioned way, but still bringing people together.
Both men say they are looking forward to seeing each other again in person, but until then, Mr. Bobrow will continue writing the bishop and making those interfaith connections. That is Currents News. I'm Emily Druby. Thank you for joining us because we are putting your faith in the news. Hope to see you again next time.